local to this community. You know, there's a big portion of me, a very large aspect of what I do professionally is tied to real estate, business brokerage, entrepreneurship, and just the business community. And, you know, kind of when I started this idea of the I Love CVille show, the idea was kind of predicated as a vehicle or as a mechanism to talk about the deal flow that I was working on and the folks in our kind of like business little ecosystem. You know, it was in some ways kind of it was a marketing mechanism for our firm, is what the I Love CVille network became. And then, you know, when we initially started the show, it was me interviewing people every day. And then I started getting feedback from the viewers and listeners, from you guys, that said, you know, our favorite aspect of the show is the commentaries that you're offering on what's going on in the community. And then you start to hear that, and you start to model the show after the feedback you're getting. It would be way easier just to have an interview with somebody in the business community, real estate community, brokerage community every day and just sit next to them and talk to them about your hobbies and interests. Way more challenging talking about murders and mayhem and the intersection of race and policing and mental health and guns. But that's where we find ourselves today. It's challenging. It's not rainbows and sunshine, and it creates content where some folks are turned off by. But the folks who are turned off by the content, you know, one thing that they are doing is they're watching the content. It's such a weird, it's like a train wreck where you're watching, you can't help but look at it. And the network is booming. I mean, it's the viewership and the listenership and the traffic, which is tangible to track. All the social platforms give you tracking mechanisms. The analytics with the websites, all tracking mechanisms. By all accounts, the network is booming, but it is mentally trying and mentally exhausting to talk about. And here we are again today, talking about the intersection of police lockdowns and how those police lockdowns tie to race. We've had 2 lockdowns this week, 2 men, 1 white, 1 black. And did race factor into the lockdowns the Charlottesville area encountered within a few days of each other? I'm going to ask you this question. Did systemic failures birth Naeem Hill's criminal history? I can't believe that is a topic, but it is. Did systemic failures birth Justin Barber's criminal history, the Crozet killer? Jefferson Council asked this question: are the unreleased reports UVA's Watergate moment? That's a great question. Then we're going to try to talk at least something somewhat light and highlight A Squared Pizza, Andy Argod, Detroit-style pizza coming north of town, and then ask the question, was the end zone location better than the Belmont pizza location? So much to cover on the show. Judah Wickhauer, things are looking good on our end here. How are things looking on your end?
Looking good.
Which headline most intrigues you today?
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah, there's a lot here. I think relating the reports to UVA's Watergate moment was well, the article was well written.
Okay. Talk about that today. All right, let's get rocking and rolling.
quiet on the set.
Good Friday afternoon, guys. I'm Jerry Miller. Thank you kindly for joining us on the I Love CVille show. It's great to connect with you on the last day of February, 2 months into the calendar year. And I'll tell you, it's been a tumultuous month for the greater Charlottesville area, for the Central Virginia community. And just sit back and back of the napkin, let's list some of the challenges faced for the Charlottesville area in February alone. We'll start with some of the basics. How about snowstorms galore? Snowstorms keeping children from going to school. Having parents juggle schedules to figure out what they're going to do with their kids as roads were iced over and snowed over for days. Was it 3 snowstorms so far this year alone? This was was this the only week that kids were in school for the full 5 days so far in 2025? And think about the week the kids were in school for the full 5 days. One of the days this week, there was a police lockdown that interrupted and interfered Charlottesville City Schools, St. Anne's Belfield, the Covenant School, other private schools. Do you call that a full 5 days? I mean, I got a first grader asking questions. I can't imagine what 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th high schoolers are asking. You got, in the month of February, a murder on Water Street in front of the garage where the police have said, people know what happened here. Will someone speak up? You got, in the month of February, a report for a triple murder tied to 3 Virginia football players, air quotes, released to the parents of the murdered football players. And then one of those football players that has passed away, their mom says, this report is bogus. It's absolute BS. Everything's been redacted. I want to know what happened to my son in 2022 when he was killed while attending your university, when I expected you to take care of him. That's in the month of February. UVA releasing that redacted triple homicide report to the parents. In the month of February, speaking of reports, the University of Virginia hires a law firm, high power law firm. And this high power law firm investigates alleged corruption, alleged phony billing, alleged medical chart changing to maintain performance standards and national rankings and regional rankings of UVA health, investigates backroom dealing and cronyism and bullying and professional leveraging and what I called yesterday racketeering of the white-collar variety. That report comes out in a clandestine, after-hours, cloaked, discreet, off-the-record, hidden Board of Visitors meeting immediately after the reports presented to the Board of Visitors Tuesday night, well after the sun had set. The chief executive officer of UVA Health and the hospital system pieces out, hits the road jack, resigns. Another report out in the month of February. This one hasn't been released. Will it be released? We'll talk about it. Is this UVA's Watergate moment? Jefferson Council is asking that question. Great question, Jefferson Council. That happened in February. Gosh, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, goodness gracious. Most months having a homicide in front of the Water Street parking garage, most months having a triple homicide investigative report redacted and released to parents to the point where parents are insulted that they don't know what happened to their dead sons. Most months having a report released at a Board of Visitors meeting that led to the resignation of the highest paid official at the University of Virginia, Craig Kent, Dr. Craig Kent. That's enough for 1 month, but that's the tip of the iceberg. Also in February, we got the Crozet killer, Justin Barber, using a machine gun to kill a retired nurse. Okay, I'll choose my words carefully. An AR-15. Choose my words carefully. Not a machine gun. An AR-15 to kill a retired nurse and to take the life of a 43-year-old father, husband. His wife gives an emotional interview to CBS 19. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, I mean, it is gut-wrenching. It made me cry. The mom sitting on the front porch of her house, the wife sitting on the front porch of her house, her father next to her, discussing the death of her husband and how the husband, the foundation of her family of 4, will not be around to play Legos, watch Marvel movies with her daughter, play basketball with her kids. The widow's father, sitting next to her on the front porch on a swing, on a bench, he says, my daughter, you know how she grieved the loss of her husband, the 43-year-old killed in that Harris Teeter parking lot in Crozet? She grieved him by touching and holding and seeing his feet. That's all they would allow her to see, because the rest of his 43-year-old body was so mutilated and massacred by that AR-15, it was not recognizable and not symbolic of a human corpse. So that's how she grieved, holding and touching his feet, because the rest of the body, she could not. It was mutilated and massacred so significantly. Watch the interview in CBS 19. Gut-wrenching interview. I'm choked up right now thinking about it. Then you got this week, a 19-year-old still has not been caught, on the lam, criminal history longer than a CVS receipt, convicted felon from his time as a juvenile, beats the bejeebus out of someone allegedly in jail here in Albemarle County, so bad that the guy he beat, he fractured his orbital bones and he's crushed his skull. That's what that means. Destroyed his orbital bone. Gets in a vehicle, Chevy Impala, has a high-speed chase, jumps out of the vehicle while it's still in drive and still moving. That Chevy Impala crashes into a state trooper's vehicle, a civilian's vehicle as well. Then for hours he's on the run. The community's captivated, paralyzed, shuddering in horror. He somehow escapes, Houdinis his way out of 4 police departments' search, German shepherds, helicopters and drones, armed men. And he's somewhere. He's got gang affiliation and gang ties, the police say. And then yesterday, goodness gracious, right just before happy hour, a madman with a knife attacks another person on the street, in public, stabs him. He's in such critical condition, the victim, that he's with life-threatening injuries at the University of Virginia Medical Center. Goodness gracious, I hope he checks his bill if he survives. Pray to God he survives. The same medical center that's under crossfire for phony billing people that are close to dying. Month of February, 2025. C'est la vie, Judah?
C'est la vie already.
Good riddance. So much to cover on the I Love CVille show on a Friday. We're going to have some very difficult conversations. Yesterday, Edward Conlon Lee, 44-year-old male, he's been charged with malicious wounding. Yesterday, just before happy hour, right before cocktail hour, police respond to the 100th block of Emmett Street for a stabbing, a stab to the victim's torso. Police sent out a text message alert, email alert, social media alert. Lockdown again. There's a man running in the city around the school and the university with a knife. He ditches some clothes to try to escape from the police. Eventually they catch him. He's in the slammer. And now people are asking this question. You know what the question they're asking, Judah Wickower? They're asking this question. 44-year-old Edward Conlon Lee, they're comparing and contrasting his lockdown, the protocols and procedures, with the lockdown protocols and procedures of earlier in the week, Naeem Hill. Many in this community are saying Naeem Hill, his lockdown was a lockdown that was very different than that of Edward Conlon Lee. And the surface compare and contrast is white man versus black man. That's what folks are saying. We'll talk about that today. Is that uncomfortable to talk about? Hell yeah, it's uncomfortable to talk about. Is that an awkward conversation? Hell yeah, it's an awkward conversation. Would it be way easier for me to sit here and interview somebody that I'm doing a real estate deal with or a business brokerage deal with? We got one closing today. Food and beverage transaction, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Been working on it since November. Closes today. Commissions paid on Monday. Would love to champion and celebrate that. Be easy peasy, Sunday breezy. Be great for the firm. Yield more business for us. The show is metamorphosized into this commentary on the news cycle. And it's blowing up. I never anticipated this. I thought I could use this as a platform to highlight deal flow. Now it's a show that's highlighting me opining and offering analysis and commentary on the intersection or the crossroads of race and policing and lockdowns, the systemic nature of criminal history being birthed because of the overlooked nature of behaviors as youth, the intersection of mental illness and AR-15s, red flags, schizophrenia, out of your mind, and gun ownership, the loss of life outside of a grocery store in sleepy and safe Crozet, the loss of life outside of a parking garage in downtown Charlottesville, homelessness and houselessness, stabbings. Yesterday, a place I frequent often in the afternoons, I'm sitting there with a buddy. A couple of kids come up to me and say, "How's all this stuff happening?" Fifth graders coming up to me and say, "Jerry, how's all this stuff happening in our town? What's going on here?" How do you answer the question of a fifth grader, two fifth graders that you see in a recreational setting, in a sports setting, coming up to you and asking, "Why is all this stuff happening where we live?" That was yesterday. Do you even answer that question when they're not your kids? Like, I sincerely have that question for the viewer and listener. Do I even answer that question when these are not my kids? Do I try to change the subject to sports, to recreation? And if I do that, they're intelligent enough to see through that. Do I offer a fluff answer only to get more peppered back with questions? Or do I really answer the question? And if I tried to answer the question, I would probably answer it like this. I did not do that. I took the coward's way out yesterday and tried to change the topic. Of course, when I changed the topic, they pushed it back to the topic that they want. Why? Because kids are smart. One thing I've learned with my first grader, even I'm seeing it with my 2-year-old, don't take them for granted. They're listening when you don't think they're listening. They're watching when you don't think they're watching. And they're doing mental calculations in their head when you don't think that they're even engaged into the world we are in today. My son, as I'm dropping him off at school at 7:40 in the morning, was asking me why Trump was kicking people out of our country. This was at school drop-off when the door was about to open. I was like, good God, this is pretty heavy for a first grader. So if I was going to truly answer the fifth grader, who's not my son, his question yesterday in the recreational sports setting, I probably would have said this. You want to know why a lot of this is happening in Charlottesville and Albemarle County? Well, we have a very interesting dynamic here. And that interesting dynamic is it's an extremely wealthy area with very well-to-do people. We have billionaires, legitimately multiple billionaires that live here. And in this intersection of extremely wealthy people, where the 2023 area median family household income was $124,200 for 2023. 2024 is going to be even more, folks. That number gets released in April by HUD. In this intersection of wealth, we have pockets of extreme poverty. And these pockets of extreme poverty ask themselves every day, how do I live in this community where I am very much in the minority by population and very much in the minority by wealth? And the unfortunate nature of these pockets of extreme poverty in the Charlottesville, Albemarle County area is many of the folks in these pockets are folks of color. And that creates this dynamic of this intersection of race and wealth and policing and housing and government. All these nuanced elements that crescendo at the exact same time. And when they crescendo or they collide, sometimes we have collateral damage. And we've seen that in the last month. And the last month, we saw a man that was exhibiting mental health issues to the point where his sister and mother asked the Albemarle County Police to take his guns away. They said, we have no basis of doing that. He hasn't hurt anyone or he has not been arrested. He gets to keep his guns. That's his right as an American. Then he goes and kills 2 other people and has an arsenal of weapons in his vehicle looking to kill more outside of a Harris Teeter in Crozet. We have another person murdered outside the Water Street parking garage in downtown Charlottesville. And this week, we have a 19-year-old who's pretty much pissed most of his life away with what he's doing now. Once he's caught, best case scenario, he ends up behind bars. Worst case scenario, this ends in some kind of gunfire. Then you got a knife-wielding maniac who's stabbing someone outside of a church in the city in daylight with people watching. I want to be open-minded and empathize with people. The older I've gotten, frankly, it was my wife and then the birth of our 2 sons has changed my outlook on a lot. Open-mindedness, more empathy. I want to empathize or ask this question. What would it be like if you were a 19-year-old black male named Naeem Hill, and for the majority of your life, you've been bullied and overlooked and marginalized and ridiculed, growing up in poverty, the only role models you have in your life are tied to gangs and to violence and crime? What behavior will be birthed from that kind of rearing and raising? Then the other side of me is like, this guy's a juvenile felony conviction, and then he's going to a playground in the city, and he's live streaming himself with an AR-15 and a pistol in his hand. And then 2 days after 2 days when he's popped by the police and he's sent to jail, within 48 hours, he's beaten the bejeebus, beaten the life out of somebody. And then he goes on a run from the police. You ready for today's show? You ready for these types of questions? How about this type of question? Why don't we compare and contrast the lockdown, the protocols, and the procedures that happened yesterday afternoon with a 44-year-old Edward Conlon Lee, a white man, with the protocols and procedures that happened earlier in the week with a 19-year-old black man and Naeem Hill? My answer may surprise you, and I'll give it to you on the show. How about a tough question? How about this question? Did systemic failures birth Naeem Hill's criminal history, and did systemic failures birth the Crozet killer Justin Barber's criminal history? How about this question? These unreleased reports from the University of Virginia, probably totaling $3 million in taxpayer-funded money. I'd say it's about close to $3 million. We know the first report was $1.5 million. Let's just use a rule of thumb. The second report also cost $1.5 million. Let's say it's $3 million total of taxpayer dollars with these reports. UVA doesn't release these reports. Is this UVA's Watergate moment? How's that for a question? Is this Richard Nixon and the tapes, Judah? Where's the deep throat?
Yeah.
Where's Woodard and Bernstein? Where's the conversation in the garage? How about this for a question? Does the Attorney General of Virginia, should he intervene? The Attorney General of Virginia. How about the Governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin? Should Glenn Youngkin and the Attorney General of Virginia intervene and say, hey, Virginia, hey, University of Virginia, you're our school. You want funding from us? Give the taxpayers the reports, even if that creates pink slips and more resignations and legal liability associated with phony billing practices and medical chart changing and cronyism and bullying and backroom dealing and white-collar racketeering. Are the reports not being released to protect men and women in power? Can I ask that question more succinctly, Judah? Are the two reports, the report associated with the murder of 3 Virginia football players and the injury of 2 others, 2 other UVA students, 3 football players murdered, 2 students injured, one of them a football player injured as well, and this white-collar racketeering at UVA Health, are these 2 reports not being released to protect power players? Is there any other reason that these reports would not be released? And then I somehow have to segue on this talk show into a Detroit-style pizza parlor is opening in End Zone Pizza north of town in the Forest Lakes Hollymead area. And then I'm going to somehow compare and contrast the End Zone Pizza opportunity for Andy Argod, friend of the program, talented basketball player for Greg Maynard's team, talented football player for Rick Verhoevac and the Almore High School Patriots at one time when he was a student here. Now a pizza genius, Detroit-style pizza genius. I'm going to compare and contrast the End Zone location to the Belmont Pizza location and which was a better spot to open a pizzeria in. God. I'll remind the viewer and listener that on Wednesday's program, coincidentally, we booked this a while ago. We have Jim Hingley on the show, a man I have tremendous respect for. I have tremendous respect for the Albemarle County Commonwealth's attorney. Tremendous respect. The first term when he ran, he was gracious enough prior to winning the first term, coming on the I Love CVille network and conversating with me and Judah. I've monikered him one of the best dressed men in Charlottesville and probably the best hat wearing guy in Charlottesville. The man pulls off a cap, a fedora, the Indiana Jones hat better than anyone in Albemarle County or Charlottesville City. Sincerely mean that. And just a good guy, fair guy, honest guy. Was Commonwealth Attorney Hingley, this is a tough question, a question that I will ask Mr. Hingley here, and I think he will say this is a fair question on Wednesday when I asked him. Did the University of Virginia use Mr. Hingley with this report release timeline? A FOIA was done and we know that the University of Virginia, Tim Longo and the University of Virginia requested a meeting with Jim Hingley. What happened in that meeting, we don't know. Interestingly, the FOIA that was done of the University of Virginia, Tim Longo and the University of Virginia, those details, that meeting request with Mr. Hingley did not come up. It came up, however, when the FOIA was done on Hingley's side, on Mr. Hingley's side. Why didn't it come up on the UVA side? Do we not see this like Judah? Do we not see this like, and this is coming from somebody who effing bleeds orange and blue, who went to UVA, whose brother went to UVA, whose dad went to UVA, who grew up going to basketball and football games, who watches every single basketball game, every single football game, attends many football games, basketball games, watches baseball, watches lacrosse, watches squash, literally bleeds orange and blue. But I'm going to call a spade, okay, Judah? Here's a spade. Are we not seeing a laundry list of cover-ups and clandestine behavior here?
Sadly.
We're seeing a Tim Longo side, UVA side getting FOIA'd, and they're not offering the details of a meeting that happened with Mr. Hingley, the Commonwealth's attorney. Mm-hmm. And then a FOIA was done with Mr. Hingley's side, and those details came out. Because Mr. Hingley is a man of honesty and character. We're seeing reports redacted to the point where is her name? Her name is Happy Perry, right?
Yeah.
She's saying this report that they gave us is absolutely insulting to me and my family. Mm-hmm. I don't know what happened to my son when he was killed while you were supposed to be keeping him safe. I just want to know what happened to my son. You got the medical school cover-up. Do we know who ordered the state police to pepper spray the students in the pro-Palestine protest?
We still don't know.
We do not know, right? Do we know?
No.
Do we not have questions of who allowed Nazis to yield torches on A11 and A12? Do we know why on A11 and A12 there wasn't a shelter in place or a lockdown of the University of Virginia, and how Nazis were legitimately allowed to come to Charlottesville and yield torches and chant slurs and racist commentary against Jews and people of color? Let me ask you a sincere question, viewer and listener. Okay, you ready for this sincere question for the viewer and listener, okay? Imagine here, and I hope some of the folks that like to throw shade at me here in the activist community hear what I'm about to say. Are you ready for this, Judah?
Yep.
Explain to me how we can have a university and citywide lockdown with a 19-year-old black male who may or may not have a gun. And we have a citywide and university-wide lockdown. Schools interfered dramatically, tremendously. And yet, on A11 and A12, we do not have a lockdown with Nazis and tiki torch bearing known Nazi supporters and Nazi bad actors by the dozens, if not hundreds, coming to this area. Can you help me understand that? Cool, the viewer and listener help me understand that. One man, 19, now his criminal history was significant. And I have said on this program yesterday that I thought the university and the city should have been locked down because we didn't want more murder and mayhem. But why was there not a lockdown, a shelter in place? Oh, no, you can't do that, with dozens, hundreds of Nazis and tiki torches and Nazi-like uniform and garb coming to the university and the city. And then the follow-up question is, put yourself in the shoes of somebody that has been historically marginalized, historically on the wrong side of the socioeconomic spectrum, living in housing that doesn't meet many of us our standards, and growing up in a community where the wealth gap, the wealth disparity is as significant as any. And then what would your behavior become? So much to cover on the program. That's just the Friday edition of the show. So I'll weave Judah Wickower in on a two-shot. We support Charlottesville Sanitary Supply, who's been in business for 60-plus years. Had a great conversation with John Vermillion earlier today. CharlottesvilleSaniTarySupply.com, online on East, or in person on East High Street, online at CharlottesvilleSaniTarySupply.com. Just great people, great family, honest people, hardworking people. Just people you want to support. I'll weave a man that's a metronome of emotional consistency, Judah Wickower, into the show. You got many in the community that are saying the 2 lockdowns that have happened this week have been a microcosm of so many other elements that have wreaked havoc in our community. Is that statement fair with the first few lower thirds being put on screen? Yesterday's lockdown versus Naeem Hill's lockdown. Compare and contrast the protocols, the messaging, the alerting, how they were done.
I think there's something to be said for the lack of good communication. Sure, you could call the lockdowns communication of a sort, but the lack of actual information has left a lot of people questioning the effectiveness of the lockdowns, questioning whether more information would have been helpful to people, would have been helpful to younger people who are just hearing, we're in a lockdown. They don't know what's going on. And for adults, they also want more information. They want to know, is this... Tell us about the threat. Is it our lives, threatened? Tell us, has somebody been hurt? I think a lot of people were curious if this coming from UVA, whether there was another incident like the
2022 triple murder.
Yeah. And when something like this goes on for hours.
All right, I'm going to be very straightforward and pointing question here. Mm-hmm. The former mayor of Charlottesville, Nakia Walker, is alleging that the lockdown yesterday with 44-year-old Edwin Conlon Lee, who had a weapon on his person, a knife, who stabbed a person, actually hurt a person, to a point where this person's in life-threatening condition at UVA Hospital. So here you have a 44-year-old white male with a knife in his possession, on his hand, stabs someone, that person injured in the hospital. That lockdown versus the lockdown earlier this week of a 19-year-old black male did not hurt anyone.
Right.
And this...
No proof he had a weapon.
No proof he had a weapon. Did not hurt anyone. Yes, he ran from the police. Yes, he jumped out of a moving vehicle. Yes, that moving vehicle he was driving crashed into a state trooper's vehicle and into an innocent bystander's vehicle, a civilian's vehicle. But no injury of person.
Right.
No proof that there was a weapon on his person. She is alleging that, in words that she's put on social media, the chief of police in Charlottesville is playing Call of Duty with young black men.
The police chief in Charlottesville?
Her words.
I'm not sure how she's bringing him into this at all, but is there any justification for her accusation?
her justification for her accusation is race?
There were lockdowns for both of them. I don't understand. I'm not even sure I get what she's trying to say.
Okay, this is what I'll say succinctly. I find myself on the opposite end of her perspective again. With the 44-year-old who stabbed somebody, they locked down, they ordered shelter in place, and they alerted the community. And they quickly found him.
Yeah.
Then they arrested him. Then they released the mugshot, released what he did, where he did it, where they found him. And they put this all out on police letterhead and published it online. Mm-hmm. With the 19-year-old, the black male, the reason that there was a photo circulating, the reason there was criminal history circulating, and the reason there was shelter in place and lockdown messaging much more prolific and voluminous was because they didn't catch him.
And they hadn't caught him.
They were looking for him. There was a longer time that had gone by to get more information that was out there. Also, it's easy to release that information once you have the person apprehended. When you have the person apprehended, you can say, here are more of the details of what happened because he's apprehended.
And we have the details of what happened.
Yes. Exactly. So while I think that some of Naeem Hill's criminal history was birthed from systemic courtroom, policing, and societal failure, and yes, while I think Justin Barber's criminal history and death were birthed from systemic policing, governmental, and societal failures.
I don't know if I'd call Barber's history.
You don't attribute Barber murdering two men and then having his life taken by an off-duty law enforcement officer, systemic, legal, policing, and societal failures?
I didn't say that. I just said I don't think I see a history of violence.
He killed two people.
Yeah.
He was threatening people.
That's not a history.
There's a fine line right there, my friend.
Oh, I don't think so.
A man with significant mental health issues to the point where his sister and mother are saying this man's a danger to society. The two people that know him the most, saying he's saying and threatening the scariest and worst things possible, and he's got a boatload of guns. That's not history for you?
Not if he hasn't committed an actual act. No, I don't think it's a history.
I respect your opinion. And a lot of people are on your side because they will make the argument we have a right to bear arms. And the police told the sister and the mother until he does something like hurt people or arrest people, we can't really do anything. And I will bet you, I'll bet you, you want to make a bet for the bottle of the bar, a $750 of something between $75 and $100? A 750 milliliter, either aged bourbon or scotch.
What's the bet first? I already know what we're...
I'd say the bet, there's going to be some kind of lawsuit brought against Albemarle County.
For not...
malpractice, negligence, not honoring or pursuing clear red flags. Anyone that's tied to the victim's family, there's two families the victims are tied to. The deceased nurse, the deceased father who's got two kids at home and a wife. He's the foundation of the family, as the wife said in this emotional interview. You don't think once the grief turns into anger that becomes what's next, that there's not going to be some kind of counsel hired, some kind of lawyer hired, and some kind of lawsuit filed?
No, I would 100%.
So you want to make a bet here? Or you're saying that there is going to be legal exposure for the county?
I definitely think that there's going to be a case or cases brought against someone. But no, I don't think there's any merit.
Wow. There's a difference between. Hold on. There's a difference between merit and in courtrooms and in legal settings. It's not justice that always prevails.
Right.
What often prevails is the hedge of exposure and additional risk. And if I'm the county and a lawsuit comes against the police or the county as a whole, I got to start reading the tea leaves and the cards. And the tea leaves and the cards say, widowed mother of two who lost her husband, the bread earner of the family, the foundation of the family, in a gun attack in a parking lot at the hands of another county resident whose sister and mother papered and documented the trail and said, we had warned the police multiple times that he had guns and he was going to hurt people. At that point, if you're any kind of counsel acting on behalf of the county, you say, you settle this and you do not allow this to go any further. You settle this any way you can. You give them what they want, portion of they want. You don't want this to go into a public court type of setting. Because in that setting, you have a widowed mother of two, an unnamed entity on either sides of the aisle. And the unnamed entity comes across as heartless, merciless.
The unnamed entity?
The county of Albemarle. It's a jurisdiction. It's an entity. It's not a human. It's not a widow with two kids that lost a husband.
Right.
I'm going to push back on the narrative that the lockdown that happened yesterday versus the lockdown that happened earlier in the week was a microcosm of how race is handled. I don't buy that.
I don't either.
I don't buy that.
I still think the lockdown for
Naeem
Hill was excessive. Probably, most likely, not in any way necessary. We got a lot of pushback when I said that before, but I think the lockdown was far more appropriate for what happened yesterday than for Naeem Hill.
Viewers and listeners, let us know your thoughts at the feed. I'm going to relay them live on air. We'll go to number one in the family first, Deep Throat. His photo on screen. He says, from my perspective, the protocols seem the same for both lockdowns. Panic texts, and my kids and I get a shelter-in-place notification. He then says, maybe some of your viewers who do law in this area can chime in, but I would imagine that the Craig Kent report in particular, will end up in discovery in any malpractice case that anybody files against UVA health system.
No doubt.
He says, I think qualified immunity means that anybody going after Albemarle County, whether police, judicial system, or otherwise, will have an almost impossible hill to climb. And he says, the Supreme Court has said that police have no duty to protect any specific person. And he highlights Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. Deep Throat.
It's good stuff.
John Blair, number two in the family. Jerry, it is so odd because I was thinking about this when I showered this morning. Truly, the I Love CVille show in 2025 has barely been able to talk land use or real estate compared to years past. I mean, normally the violent Crown situation, what happened with Dewberry offers, would be weeks worth of discussion. It is crazy how much it's been about UVA and crime this year, not a complaint, just an observation. He's right.
Yeah.
And he says, I mean, this week, SCOTUS issued an opinion about John Dewberry's holdings, and you haven't had a second to even talk about it. He's right. I saw it, and I haven't.
Yeah.
He's right.
Mm-hmm.
How about this topic that's flowing under the radar? In the Jack Jewett district of Albemarle County, there's a candidate that's running to replace Diantha McKeel, who's not going to run again. She's been on the Board of Supervisors for 3 terms, Diantha McKeel. And in the Jack Jewett district, there's a candidate, and I believe her name is, I'm just going to confirm here, Sally Duncan. Sally Duncan is a candidate that's running for the Board of Supervisors. And on her website, which she has up, on her policy page, she's explicitly calling for the expansion of the developmental area in Albemarle County. The development area is restricted to 5%. Any other day, any other week, the lead of the program would be Albemarle County candidate running Sally Duncan, backed by Livable Charlottesville and activists in the city, pro-housing affordability, pro-density, pro-growth champions in the city, now infiltrating and influencing county politics, platforming, endorsing, backing a candidate that's a tenant, a renter. Neil Williamson said, his words, not mine, the president of the Free Enterprise Forum that covers this closer than anyone I know, said he says in his entire time of covering government, he's never seen anyone in the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors that's been a renter. John Blair makes the reference, after I say that weeks ago from Neil Williamson, that maybe Chris Dumler, who I think was living in the town of Scottsville at the time, certainly represented the Scottsville district, got in some trouble tied to sexual behavior. You guys can look it up and research it yourself. John believes that Chris was a tenant, was a renter. So here you have a candidate in Sally Duncan that if she should win, now she has opposition, but if she should win in my district, Jack Jewett district, much of Ivy, she could potentially partner with Michael Pruitt with ideology. And there's another seat up for grabs. Jim Andrews' seat in the Samuel Miller district. The chitter chatter has a candidate considering running that's like-minded to Sally Duncan and like-minded to Mike Pruitt. Now there is already one candidate in the Samuel and Jim Andrews' district, the Samuel Miller district, and this candidate works for the University of Virginia. Think about that. Does anyone want to push back on the fact that Jim Andrews, who will not seek a second term in the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, has endorsed the current chair of the Planning Commission? His name is Fred, how do you think I say his last name? M-I-S-S-E-L. Missel?
M-I-S-S-E-L?
Yeah.
Missel.
Fred Missel. He's the Director of Design and Development of the University of Virginia Foundation. The candidate that's being backed by Jim Andrews. And Jim Andrews, remember, got his spot on the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors because the previous candidate, what was the previous candidate, Neil or John, that was in the Samuel Miller district? I should know that. It was a female, a woman. Oh, I should know that. All right, I'll look that up. I don't want to go in the weeds. But how Jim Andrews got his spot is because the candidate before him backed him. And now he's doing the same thing of backing Fred Missel. And Missel works for the University of Virginia Foundation, which is what? The second largest landowner, one of the largest landowners in Albemarle County? Right?
Yeah.
Should we not be concerned that we have two candidates that are running for Albemarle County's Board of Supervisors? One candidate who's running unopposed right now works for the University of Virginia Foundation. Legitimately, that's how he makes his living. He's running unopposed. Another candidate in the Jack Jewett district has a platform that is expand the development area, build more housing density, aligns with Livable CVille, aligns with Mike Pruitt, the representative from the Scottsville district. And right before our eyes, we're seeing government, a game of chess being played with the Board of Supervisors that could absolutely alter Albemarle County and its future. Absolutely alter it. And no one's talking about it. Is no one talking about it because they don't know about it? Is no one's talking about it because they're being distracted by murder and mayhem? Is no one talking about it because they're being distracted by the intersection of race and lockdowns and shelter in place and police and messaging? Is no one talking about it because they're being distracted by UVA reports that are not being released? Is no one talking about it because the news locally has become a shadow of its former self and no one can get it? Is no one talking about it because I'm not talking about it? Are we the news? We got all the stations watching us now. You heard Bree Stith come on the program this morning. She did a great job. She's a realtor with Keller Williams. She was on Real Talk with Keith Smith. She was formerly an NBC 29 reporter. Before the show, she said, all of us over at NBC 29 watched everything you did on the I Love CVille show, your tweets, your social media posts, and what you talked about on the show. And that was something that us as reporters literally looked at in determining what we were going to cover that day and the next day. Her words. Think about that. Crazy times. We live in a crazy effing world.
No doubt about that.
Georgia Gilmer. Regarding August 11th and August 12th, Georgia Gilmer, if you got her photo on screen. It was being billed as First Amendment right, even though there were clear threats to the community. In turn, the powers that be asked the community to voluntarily stay home. That, of course, did not happen. Not sure a lockdown would have been legal because it would have prevented individuals from exercising their right to freedom of expression prior to all SHIT breaking loose. Isn't it a crazy world we live in where Nazism and the Klan are free speech protected, yet a 19-year-old on the run who may or may not have a gun, who had a dead inspection sticker and a charge from a brawl in the jail over his head, caused a city and county-wide shelter in place, lockdown, and emotional paralysis. Vulnerability. It's a crazy world we live in. Jason Noble says this: hell yes, the Attorney General and the Governor of Virginia should do exactly what you said, Jerry, and force the release of the reports to the public. And they should say, if you don't release the reports, we're going to leverage funding against you, UVA.
Yeah.
And he also says, I think we also observed that a car can kill someone just as easily as a gun. I would imagine that's a reference to Heather Heyer, unfortunately. And Fields, that was the guy's name that drove the Dodge Charger into a flock of people.
Yeah.
And he says, Naeem Hill was being more reckless and 100% endangered lives. And he's saying Naeem Hill, Jason Noble was being more reckless and 100% endangered more lives than the knife-wielding, stabbing, torso-stabbing maniac. You buy that?
You could potentially say that was true about his reckless drive to escape the police, but once he jumped out of the car, is that still applicable?
That's a great question. Liz Palmer, thank you, John Blair. Samuel Miller District, God, I love you, John Blair. Give you a hug right now, fist bump for sure. Liz Palmer endorsed Jim Andrews. Jim Andrews, because of Liz Palmer's endorsement in the Samuel Miller District, John lives in that district. He gets an unopposed race. He wins. Now Jim Andrews is doing what Liz Palmer did for him and endorsing someone that works for the UVA Foundation. Does anyone ask questions in this community We have a candidate for one of 6 spots in the Board of Supervisors that works for the UVA Foundation that's going to help determine the intersection of development, a $600+ million budget, and how UVA and Albemarle County can coexist. Can you explain to me how an elected official, one of 6 people that determine a $600 million plus budget, can, without bias, offer his yes vote or no vote on anything tied to the University of Virginia in Albemarle County? Would he not have to recuse himself on everything? Does Brian Pinkston not have to recuse himself on everything? He gets a paycheck from UVA. Who is asking these questions? Are we the only ones asking these questions? What the hell is going on? Are we the only ones that are pointing out that the Jack Jewett, Sally Duncan candidate represents much of Ivy is already on her website saying expand the developmental area? If people actually knew that, would she win?
I wonder how many of the average Albemarle County residents understand what's behind that question.
Okay, you're saying I need to put it more succinctly?
No, I'm saying
expand the developmental area means more housing will be built in Albemarle County. There will be more houses. There will be more traffic. There will be more strain on infrastructure, more strain on fire and rescue, more strain on water, more strain on schools, more kids learning in trailers at schools. Is that more straightforward?
That's definitely more straightforward.
More damming of the environment because more vehicles on the road. More traffic incidents. More collisions. Has anyone spent a day driving from Keswick or Barbersville through Pantops to the city of Charlottesville? I've been here 25 years. That drive didn't used to take 40 minutes. It takes 40 minutes now. Has anyone spent a day going to and from Hollymead and Forest Lakes to Charlottesville to work at UVA? That drive didn't used to take 40 minutes. It takes 40 minutes now. You know, are we going to sacrifice quality of life because we're going to prioritize density to the level seen at Fredericksburg in Northern Virginia? One of the reasons people choose to make Albemarle County home is the preservation of green space. One of the things I like about Chris Fairchild, the Fluvanna County Board of Supervisor, friend of the program, love Chris Fairchild. Hope Chris Fairchild hears this. Hope Chris Fairchild hears this. You know what I like about people like Chris Fairchild? You know, this came up when we were at a dinner with family, with friends of ours. And the other couple that we were sitting across at the alley light said, you know what we like about you, Jerry? Same thing I like about Chris Fairchild. This is what she said, the other couple. She said, you know exactly who you are. Don't care what other people think about you. This is who you are, and you're not going to change. And we know who you are and what you stand for. And we can agree to disagree if we need to. But you are who you are. And that makes you somebody I like. Same thing with Fairchild.
Yeah.
Fairchild, preservation of green space. Fairchild, keep Fluvanna County rural. Fairchild, anti-development. Fairchild, pro-business. That's not really materializing into anything Fluvanna County. I'm sorry, Chris. The anti-development certainly is. Me, you want to know what I stand for when it comes to Albemarle County? Here's me, Albemarle County in a nutshell. Ready, Judah? Why don't we start prioritizing quality of life and children learning in classrooms and children getting to school on time and home on time and start prioritizing our fire and rescue and our police and start being able to live in our communities and start prioritizing bicycle lanes and pedestrian and start prioritizing green spaces and start prioritizing the environment and start prioritizing an area that when my kids become adults or when my kids' kids become adults, they have an Albemarle County that's as good as the Albemarle County when I first arrived here 25 years ago. Why don't we prioritize Albemarle County and not turning into Fredericksburg, Virginia or Northern Virginia, which is a clusterfuck? Why don't we prioritize spending in a way that is fiscally conservative, where the middle class of Albemarle County does not feel like that they're becoming the pinch class, the evaporated or the eviscerated class? Why don't we prioritize an Albemarle County that comes up with incremental sources of tax revenue? Why don't we prioritize an Albemarle County that figures out ways for Albemarle Countyans to continue living in Albemarle County for generations to come? Why don't we prioritize an Albemarle County that is not so tax? The county executive proposes a 4-cent tax rate increase. At the same time, assessments are spiking double-digit percentages for some people. What's that going to do? Just gentrify the middle class of Albemarle County, gentrify the upper class out of Albemarle County. Soon it's going to be a county of 1%ers, 2%ers, 5%ers. This is what some people are saying. Let's raise the taxes to create housing affordability. Explain to me how that works. Has anyone explained to you how that works? Let's tax people more so we can create affordability. How does that work? Don't work in groceries. Doesn't work in gasoline. Doesn't work in beer. Doesn't work in toys. Doesn't work in any commodity. Charge people more. What are they going to do? They're going to buy less. Charge people more on housing. What are they going to do? They're going to sell their houses. And you know who they're going to sell them to? People who can afford them. Not people who can't afford them right now. People who can't afford them right now aren't going to buy them tomorrow. They can't afford them right now. Tomorrow they're more expensive. You got a game of 3-card monte. A dude with a cardboard box on a Big Apple corner, trying to hustle you out of the money in your pocket with a little red ball under some solo cups and asking you to find the ball or find the ace of spades with 3 cards on the cardboard box. Crazy. Crazy world we live in. Yeah. Deep Throat says, speaking of your point on cost of growth, people like Lloyd Snook would always say, let's get more housing and build it, and it will help lower taxes. It will create a bigger tax base. And he says, but Albemarle County has had massive housing production, 2 times the national average rate. And guess what? Both increases in assessment and increase in rate. Adding population does not automatically improve the fiscal situation. Do you know why? Okay, how about this viewer? He's right. You know why adding the population does not automatically improve the fiscal situation? I'll ask Judah Wickhauer that question first. Why does adding population does not automatically improve the fiscal situation? Why is that? Put it very succinctly, Judah.
I'm not sure I've got the answer to that.
Because when you add to the population, that population has to be serviced. That population is going to create, what is the number one line item on the Albemarle County budget? Every year. Schools. Every year the schools ask for more money. Every year the schools are asking for more money. And now the schools are they're playing a game of chicken. Here's the game of chicken that the schools are doing, that Dr. Matthew Haas is doing. That guy's a smart SOB. Dr. Matthew Haas is a smart SOB. You don't stay superintendent of schools for this long without being a smart son of a bitch. And this is what this guy is doing. Are you ready for this? Mm-hmm. He's sending messages out to Albemarle County parents using his principles, leveraging his principles. And he's saying, I'm going to get my principles to tell the parents that we're going to cut their kids' foreign language out. And we're going to make sure that those moms in Western Albemarle, in Murray, in Meriwether, in Ivy, they find out that their foreign language is going to be cut because we don't have enough money. And those moms, Dr. Haas, I'm going to get my principals at Western and my principals at Murray and my principals at Meriwether and my principals at Henley. And I'm going to get those principals to send out an email. And that email is going to say, your kids will not learn because they won't give us enough money. And guess what's going to happen, Jude? Guess what's going to happen?
Parents are going to be up in arms.
Parents are going to be up in arms.
Give them the money they need.
They're going to go to the school board and they're going to go to their Albemarle County Board of Supervisors and say, shame on you. Shame on you.
But none of them are actually going to look into
We
where
want
the
more
money's being
money
spent.
for our kids to learn. And then Haas is going to get his money for his budget. And let me tell you what, when you increase the population, more kids go to school. And the county's going to need more money for schools. When you increase the population, more cars drive on roads. When you increase the population, more fire and rescue and ambulance and rescue is needed. More water is needed. More everything is needed. Does anyone not see this? Juan Sarmiento watching the program. The Naim Hill incident was UVA police, was it not? Did Virginia State Police and Charlottesville Police Department assist them? Yes, Mr. Sarmiento, there was 4 police departments assisting. And Juan Sarmiento says, I am so glad Nakaya Walker is no longer the mayor. Juan Sarmiento says, what a cancer she is. His words, not mine, Nakaya. Curtis Shaver. I used to drive from Belmont to Hollymead Shopping Center every day for work. It took me 20 to 25 minutes in the morning, 30 on the way home today. Belmont to Hollymead, 30 minutes. That's insane.
Yeah.
My wife, when we were living in Keswick, and our kids went to school in the city and did sports on the right over the western side of the city line, was spending 2.5 to 3 hours every day driving in the car. If you're going to spend 2.5 to 3 hours every day driving in a car, go live in McLean or Northern Virginia or Manhattan. You don't live in Charlottesville. That's why we moved. Jason Noble throwing shade at Dr. Haas. I will say this. I think Matthew Haas is a savvy and sophisticated politician.
Oh, yeah.
That knows how to play this game. And he does it through the guise of being a humble, bow tie wearing, jacket wearing, glasses wearing, school bus driving at times, longtime educator that hides behind the influence and the arrow catching school board. But what he's doing while hiding behind those arrows, that political crossfire, and that crossfire is going to be effing significant when the moms and Ivy and Western Albemarle rip the school board a new you-know-what because their kids don't have language.
Yeah.
Haas is just going to sit behind that school board, and he's going to watch as that school board gets ripped, proverbially macheted and sliced and diced, when what he did from behind that school board was have his middle management, his principals, send an email to the base of people that were going to get angry, organize and strategize and galvanize, and come back, political crossfire the elected officials to the point where they get their money for the budget. It's a puppet master. It's a puppeteer of talented proportions. Is anybody asking these questions? Who's asking these questions? Why aren't we asking these questions? Why are we asking these questions? Heck, I should be talking about A Squared Pizza opening in End Zone, or what's the best use of Belmont Pizza? And should A Squared have opened in End Zone, or should it have opened in Belmont Pizza? And which one has more upside? How do you know?
I mean, they probably were getting ready to open before Belmont even closed, to be fair.
No, you're right. He had no idea. He had no idea. He had no idea. It was shocked everybody, right? It's just fodder for a talk show.
Mm-hmm.
Which pizza location has the better upside?
Yeah.
All right, that's 75 straight minutes of unfiltered, unstopped commentary and analysis of what's happening in Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Central Virginia across the following silos or categories of news: current events, crime, policing, land use, government, schools, finance, food and beverage, the economy, the intersection of race and how it applies to perception through elected officials, policing leaders, and the university. We added a bit of history with Watergate and Richard Nixon and the tapes. We included conspiracy and white-collar racketeering. No one else is doing that. Not in a 300,000 person market. There's no one else giving you that. Judah Wickower kicks some ass today. My name is Jerry Miller. This is the I Love CVille show.